So we're now live, are we? Welcome everybody then to this meeting of the Corporate Overview Scrutiny Group. We will begin with the first item on the agenda, which are the apologies for absence. Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry, apologies from Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Thank you. And the second item, declarations of interest. Has anybody anything to declare? No? In that event, we move on to the minutes. The minutes of the meeting, which were held on the 22nd of September. I'm assuming everybody has read them, but if we can go through them page by page. So page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Nobody has anything to comment. So those minutes are agreed, and I will sign them in the course of time. Right, we now move on to item 4, which is the Diversity Annual Report, and I believe Sam Maher from East Midlands Councils will be presenting the report. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this report is to provide the group with an update on our progress against the objectives that are set out in the equality scheme. And those objectives are about monitoring the demographic makeup of our workforce and how that compares to the local population. Also consulting customers and staff and carrying out equality impact assessments as part of that scheme. So the report that's been prepared for you gives you the snapshot of data that looks at our own workforce compared to the local population. So we have the local population provided in Appendix A, and then we've got the workforce information provided at Appendix B for you. And from that, you would be able to see that pretty well our workforce reflects the local population, both in terms of ethnicity and disability. We also have a peak within our workforce of people aged between 45 and 54. And so that's also reflected where there's an age peak within the local population. The report also provides you with information on our progress in terms of the gender pay gap. So every year we're required to monitor and report the gender pay gap. And I'm pleased to report that over the last 12 months, there was an improvement in that gap. And so the difference between the average pay between men and women has reduced to now being 1%, whereas last year it was 7.2%. Just to give you a flavour of how that reflects to other local authorities, we don't.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh,
Oh,
no,
the gender. Sorry?
You froze for a while.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, so local authorities are no longer required since March to publish their data because of the COVID situation. But I've got the national figures for the gender pay gap within local government last year, and that was a gap of 6%. So last year Rushcliffe was quite similar to the national average, if you like, but we've seen an improvement in that last 12 months so that the gap is now just 1%. And when we look at the makeup of our workforce, then we've seen an increase in women at the higher levels within the organisation. So that sort of helps to explain that change. The report also sets out where we've provided training and development to help raise awareness of barriers that may exist in achieving equality and diversity and inclusion. And I hope the report is of use and of interest to the group, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I therefore open it up to councillors. Have you any questions on the report? All very quiet. In which event, we were asked to note the report, which I assume we are all noting. And therefore we move on to the next item.
Thank you.
The next item being feedback from the Scrutiny Chairman. I was going to go to Councillor Clark first, but if I can, before I do that, welcome Davinder to us, who I believe will be Councillor Clark's Vice Chairman. We look forward to working with you, Davinder.
Thank you very much, Chair. Glad to be here and look forward to working with the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman, and yes, echo my welcome to Councillor Verdi as well. The group last met in October, 14th of October, and we discussed two main items. Well, it was going to be three items. We started off with the Abbey Road development, but it was reported to us that the contract had not yet been signed, and therefore it wasn't appropriate for us to discuss that. And in fact, that's still the case, unless somebody can tell me otherwise. I believe that we're still waiting for the contract to be signed. So I have a pen here. If anybody would like to borrow a pen, it's a real proper fountain pen, and I'm sure I'd be very willing to lend it to somebody just to put their signatures on it. It's very simple to do, you know. Anyway, moving on. Sorry, excuse me. Hopefully that will come to our January meeting, although keeping fingers crossed, but January seems to be approaching rather quickly now, and I'm not sure if that signature will appear on the contract in time, but I know we'll probably discuss that in the work programme. We talked about the new proposed crematorium at Strugglethorpe, which proved a very interesting project. There were many angles that we discussed. I won't list them all now because they are in the minutes. But basically, I think some of the important points: the crematorium is to be operated as an in-house model, and the group were happy with that. Sorry, I've just pages seems to have gone awry. Just bear with me 1 second. So yes, there were various aspects discussed. For instance, I think probably also one of the main things is the method of operation is to be an electric cremator rather than a gas cremator. And we did ask things like, well, what happens if there's a power cuts, but there will be, it's rather expensive to produce you know, alternative means. So let's just hope that the sufficient facilities will be in place. I think the only other thing really is that there will be a name as yet to be considered. I am aware that obviously since that meeting and since the minutes were produced, then I know the Cabinet have made an initial assessment of lists of names, but I believe that the final decision has yet to appear. So moving on, the other item we talked about was planning enforcement, and there were many issues discussed on that. The recommendation was to take the recommendation to Cabinet. That has now been done, and the recommendation coming out of Cabinet was that there be a further consultation period on that, which is absolutely fine, and I think that's to be welcomed, and that will be going back to Cabinet in the fullness of time. So I think that's probably where we are at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Has anybody anything they wish to ask Councillor Clark? No? Therefore, I'll move on to Councillor Wheeler.
Chairman, so since the last meeting of the Corporate Review Group, we've had one meeting of the Community Scrutiny Group, which was 7th of October. There we discussed two items. So first of all was flooding and drainage, where we had three presentations, one from the Borough Council team, one from the County Council team, and from the Internal Drainage Board. I think it was very useful, especially to councillors who aren't twin hats like myself, or perhaps were not as au fait as what the County Council does and how all the bodies come together and work. So feedback I got from the council, I found it very useful to actually understand the process, how everyone interacts. Also, we gave some feedback from ourselves in terms of the need to work closer together and on some of the issues around perhaps not being as clear on communication with residents in terms of the issues that are happening. So I mean, that was quite a useful first topic. It was meeting one, went on for over an hour. And then we got into the risk of nature strategy, which again was another lengthy item for over an hour. So again, that was a presentation from Paul Phillips and the team for our council, which again I think we found very useful in terms of what the council's doing with the conservation strategy, what the plans are, the next strategy. A lot of discussion, especially around the free tree scheme. So we added in an extra recommendation, which was to recommend to Cabinet to continue with the free tree scheme. Also, we're now at the point where 7,500 free trees have been given out by as councils since 2018, which I think is something we should celebrate. And obviously, hopefully, there's demand for that to keep going, especially with the amount of new houses coming in, who potentially, I'm sure, would like some trees to go in there. Very sparse gardens that usually get provided when you buy a new house. The main issue that we're having on the Community Scrutiny Group as an overall, which my group wanted me to feedback, so to speak, tonight, was the need for flexibility around meetings. So we've had items that have been bumped 3, 4, even one item 5 times over the last year because simply we're trying to fit all the items in and we can't. Obviously, it's fantastic that we get things coming through this group from the Matrix and recommended from full council. I want that to continue, but we're having the issue now. We're trying to fit everything in, especially the wide remit of the group. So what I'd like is for next year that there is some flexibility. We feel like we need to put an extra meeting in. I fully appreciate the officer time involved and everyone else, the resource needs to go in. But I do know from members from our group and me as included as well, got items that we want to scrutinise, but with here that we can't actually fit them in how things currently stand. So, I mean, further evidence of that is in January, we're actually having a separate meeting, a presentation on dog fouling, littering and fly tipping part 2, because that's been delayed 4 times and we were going to have to delay it a further time, which we didn't feel was acceptable really. And that's why we're putting that extra presentation. But in fact, we probably could have had an extra meeting instead and added in an extra couple of items. But to be fair, there wasn't really the time for that to be organised and put together, especially with everything going on at the moment and the Christmas break. So that's just something that we'd like to feed that back and for everyone to consider if they're happy with that, potentially have that flexibility for next year. Our next meeting, we'll say we've got 2 really in effect. We've got the presentation on the 24th of January, if my memory serves, and then on the 28th, we look at the future of Walton Golf Course, and we've got the risk of equality scheme, which is down, it says part 2. The reason for that is we had that brought to us in August meeting or September meeting, I believe, and again, we weren't happy with the report as it stood, so we fed back some issues that to come back so we can properly look at it and give our recommendations to Cabinet. And that's it for me, Chair. Not sure if Val wants to add anything to that as my Vice Chairman.
No, nothing to add, just to highlight the flexibility of meetings, what Councillor Wheeler just mentioned, and the packed agendas coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bansal. Right, in the absence of Councillor Purdue-Horan, he has sent me a report from his meeting, the Governance Scrutiny Group, on the 24th of November. There was an internal audit progress. A full and comprehensive update report was provided to the group by our internal auditors, BDO, and the report was noted. Statements of accounts for 2019-20. A full and comprehensive report was provided by our Section 151 officer, Peter Linfield, and the following 4 recommendations were approved unanimously. Findings of MASA's audit completion report prior to recommending the approval of the statement of accounts. The statement of accounts for 2019-20, including the annual government statement, subject to the outcome of the Nottinghamshire County Council Pension Fund audit. The management representation letter, subject to the outcome of Nottinghamshire County Council Pension Fund audit. And that the chairman or vice chairman, in the absence of the chairman of Governance Scrutiny Group, and Section 151 officer have delegated authority for the final approval of the audited statement of accounts for 2019-20, and any changes to the management representation letter subject to a satisfactory outcome of the Nottinghamshire County Council Pension Fund audit, notifying members of the Governance Scrutiny Group of any significant issues arising. Treasury and asset investments, 6 months update. A full and comprehensive report up to the 30th of September 2020 was provided to the group and presented by our Financial Services Manager, Sarah Whitaker. The update was noted. That being a correct update, is there anything else you wish to add, Councillor Walker, as Vice Chairman?
Yeah, I had no idea that Councillor Purdue-Horn had sent his apologies, actually. But that, yeah, it would have been nice as Vice Chair to have known that ahead of time. That'd be my only addition to the kind of discussion.
I think it was somewhat late in the day because I only received this myself this evening.
Is that normal for the Vice Chair not to receive the report? Is that a normal kind of way for things to move?
It hasn't happened before, so what is normal? Okay, right. We move to item 6, which is the consideration of Scrutiny Group work programme.
Councillor Verdi's got a question.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chair. I think as a member of the Government Scrutiny Group, I just wanted to really highlight that the report you've presented on behalf of the Chair, in my view, is very accurate. Having attended that particular meeting, I think it very well represents the discussions that took place. And I would just really bring to this group's attention the reference to the pension potential pension analysis impact. I don't personally believe it's going to be material, but the auditors have rightly highlighted that pending the outcome of that, the accounts were a very satisfactory sort of set of accounts, and we've noted those. So in summary, really just to add in the Chair's absence, as a member of the group, I feel that summary was very well presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. Very helpful. Thank you very much. Right, so if we move on then to item 6 and the consideration of the Scrutiny Group work programmes. Right, I'm just moving down to them. The corporate overview group is somewhat of a rolling programme, so really there is little to add or discuss in that unless anybody has anything they wish to raise. No? Then moving to Governance Scrutiny Group. Again, that tends to be a bit of a rolling programme. I don't know whether the Vice Chairman or Councillor Verdi wish to add anything to that, but it is a rolling programme. No. So we then move to Growth and Development Scrutiny Group. As Councillor Clark has already alluded to, the Abbey Road development is hopefully coming to fruition in January, and I have a pen. If anybody else needs to borrow one. And the programmes look slightly void after April because we're moving into a new year. And I suspect they're going to be very quickly populated. Sorry.
I think possibly, Chairman, I mean, at the moment, we keep our fingers crossed for January. But obviously, if Abbey Road contract doesn't get signed, then that will have to get put back again to the April one. So maybe, I mean, obviously, we may just have one item on the January one, or else whether there's something else that we could look at. But it is rather short notice now for January. There's probably, especially with Christmas, there's a whole week or more taken out. So it may be that there's just that one item for January, depending on how the contract goes.
Mrs. Cavan-Attock.
Sorry, Chairman, if I may, I've actually got a list of about 8 or 9 different potential topics that we're working into matrices at the moment, things that officers know are coming up over the course of next year, policies that need reviewing, projects that are coming to fruition. So too concerned about the programme looking a bit sparse at the moment. We will bring those forward to the next meeting of Corporate Overview Group. And of course, we always invite councillors to put forward their suggestions as well. Moving forward, we'll make sure that we publicise that in advance of the next meeting we did with this one. Councillor
Walker.
Yeah, I want to talk about the work programme for the growth and development. I think it'd be a nice chance to have the public involved for the cycling in April. And there's a really lovely group that's quite keen to get involved called Pedals. They're quite knowledgeable when it comes to the kind of the cycle paths around the borough. So I'd like for everyone to consider that as an option, please.
Perhaps Councillor Clark, you could discuss that with your lead officer.
We'll consider it.
Right, so moving to the community scrutiny group, as Councillor Wheeler alluded to, there is a briefing, I believe, before the littering and fly tipping scrutiny item in January because of the lack of space and the fact that this has already been pushed back. It does look quite a full meeting, if I might say, in January. And I'm sympathetic to what Councillor Wheeler says about communities do seem to get a lot of scrutiny items and maybe do need another meeting.
Yeah, well thank you. Oh, sorry, let Charlotte comment first before I send my comments.
No, Councillor Wheeler, please go ahead.
Like, you know, it was, I mean, just to reinforce that point, you know, like I said before, we really appreciate the fact that there is actual officer work involved, but as I said, they're looking at, there's a few items on the proposals. I know that Charlotte will probably talk about in a moment where that would come to our meeting. And again, I know of 3 items that councillor spoke to me about that they want to put through the matrix, and were actually saying to me, we haven't yet because, you know, look at the programme, it looks very full, and obviously I don't want to discourage anyone from wanting to bring forward items to scrutinise. So again, you may shoot me down here, Chairman, but I just remember this year, you know, we cancelled a corporate overview group because, again, just how it worked, there wasn't enough items there. And so if there was that flexibility, so there's still the same amount of officer time, but maybe reducing one of these meetings and adding in the communities one may work a bit better if that helps with the time for the manager, for the officer's involvement. But again, obviously don't want to take that away, Shield's choice, Chairman, but it's just a suggestion just based on the experience we've had so far this year.
I think if you look at the next meeting when Charlotte says they will have a list of potential items and we look at what the picture looks like, we could maybe make a decision at that point as to whether we need extra meetings and when. Because I was very conscious of the length of time the last meeting took. Yes, Charlotte.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I fully sympathise with what both of you have said, and a lot of the items that we've got coming through both this year and potentially in the wings, as it were, are going to communities if they are approved. I think the point that I just wanted to make, that whilst I'm not unsympathetic, and I will of course raise it with the management team internally, is that if you look at this programme now, as you said, we've got a lot on in January, the April meeting only, and then there's nothing. So I just want councillors to be mindful of the fact that we don't have to scrutinise everything straight away, that there will be some items that actually, do we need to do dog fouling now? I know it's been delayed because it was on the programme this year, but it's not time critical. And of course, officers will always pay attention to those items which are time critical and make sure that you've got the meetings that you need to do those, but you do have to be mindful of the resources.
I hear what you say about time critical in terms of policy or finance, etc. But as far as the public are concerned, who have been complaining about such issues for a long time, it is to them time critical.
I
So
appreciate that.
We have to keep that in mind when considering these things, because otherwise they just say, oh yes, the council pushes it into the long grass again, so to speak. Yeah.
May I make a different suggestion then?
Yeah.
The corporate overview group coming up next time round, just check which date that is. I think it's March. We don't have any items other than our standing items. And of course, like this evening with the diversity annual report, there is a potential there that if there was something that was time critical that the groups couldn't match up, there's no reason why we shouldn't look at it overall. And that's a possibility for any future items moving forward, though there is no capacity in the other groups.
Oh, no, that's interesting. So I thought we had to remain independent.
I would say that your preference, your remit cover all of the other groups. And if there is a very good argument capacity for those groups not being able to pick up on certain items, then there could be made an argument whereby we look at it as the corporate overview group.
No, I appreciate that suggestion, Charlotte, and I say it's a good one on the overview, but I just feel like then we're looking to move around the blocks in terms of let's put half agenda communities on potentially this group, where actually we're better off looking at the overall meeting plan, actually adding that extra communities, because again we might have the problem where we decide which items are going to come here, which stay there. Does it look like they're more important by coming here? They're going to communities. Does it look like the communities group may feed that back as well and say, we now just get what's left over? That's the danger we potentially have. And I think it's something where, again, if you want to look at the next meeting, we have the full work program coming forward. I know what you say looks empty at the moment, but I do know there will be some rolling items potentially from that we've looked at the previous year that we're going to need to look at again next year. So it may look empty at the moment, but I would put my house on the fact that, we're going to be at the same point this time next year. We're going, well, actually, we've got these big items. And because as well, and it's great as well, the items aren't quick sign-off items in terms of potentially, tick boxes. Each item's taken probably an hour on each one. And if I'm being perfectly honest, last meeting, I rushed through bits I actually would like to be more scrutiny, but I was very conscious of the fact we probably would have been there till 11 p.m. if I let the internal drainage board go on for 3 hours as they were pregnancy with their 60-page presentation. But for that point, I didn't really want to do that. Well, conscious I had to, and that's again, don't want to get down that route of not actually effectively scrutinising, which obviously we want to do by being very conscious we've got up against the clock or we're having to move items because we can't all fit it in. So I just want that to bear in mind, really.
Well, as I say, once we have this list of potential items that we're already aware of, I think we need to look at the number of meetings and have a discussion about that. All right, so we now move to the Scrutiny Matrix and an update on current police performance and resources for Rushcliffe has been put forward as a topic, which seems to me to be highly relevant. And I note that there is potential for the community scrutiny group to be looking at this, and I suspect this would be quite a large item. So has anybody any comments they wish to make on that?
Just say, Chair, I think whoever put that in, whichever council put it in, did a fantastic job writing that item, putting it in.
Do you know, I don't know who did that.
No, I don't know, absolutely not.
No.
But no, we're happy, I'm sure, to have that communities. And just get back around why I put that item in. I think it's very pertinent with the amount of money that has been invested in policing, which is fantastic. It's important that we scrutinise that as a council and to feed that back both to Cabinet and to the police if we don't think it's in the maybe not being used the right way, so to speak, actually to fully understand, because Operation Reacher sounds very impressive and we may know what it is. Well, I think if you said to the members of the public, all your money's gone to Operation Reacher, they'll go, well, what the hell is that then? So I think actually just want to get that probably go off that we can communicate background and to look at fully.
It's very much in the public interest, isn't it? Absolutely agree with that. The next proposed item was inclusive language. Now, I rather think this is covered in other areas and other forums. I think we are a very good council in this regard. So I'm not sure that it should necessarily be going forward to scrutiny. Does anybody have any strong feelings on that? Councillor Wheeler?
Just say that I'm happy if these bits were, you know, covered in, as was being recommended, I think, by the officers, to be included in with the quad scheme when we look at that in the next meeting in January. So wherever we can do to incorporate that, I think more than happy to look at if we don't want it as a separate item.
Councillor Walker?
I'd quite like to see it as scrutiny, because I think it's a debate worth having. I think there is bias on the council. I think there's a lot of bias, and I think there's a lot of issues with language, actually. I think there's a lot of issues with how women are treated that need to be looked at. And I think this would be a really good thing to get a debate on, to be honest. And
How
so
women
I'm
are
quite
treated?
keen for it to go. You know, there's lots of interrupting and things like that. So there's like, I'd be quite keen for this to be brought forward, because the language, even just the fact that we still use chairman, is so out of date and archaic. And it very much hints at kind of, and the fact that councillors and people don't even realize that that's language is important. It's an important kind of statement that we're making as a council. And if we're willing to kind of tolerate chairman, as opposed to say chair, which is completely gender neutral, then I think it shows a bias.
Could I point out that chairman is not, it is gender neutral. The man in chairman has nothing to do with men. It comes from the Latin mano, meaning hand.
I think there's room for debate. Obviously, that just shows that there is room for debate on this, which is my point, really.
Well, I'm not sure that I think this is a very good council and a very fair and equal council. And I'm not sure that there is the resources to put towards this at this stage.
I feel like it might be a question of it looking, and not, it's, you know, bad PR. It'd look bad not for us to talk about this and have an open discussion.
Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but this can easily be covered under equality and diversity. And when the subject of chairman just came up, other people might think chair is neutral. As far as I'm concerned, I take being called chair as an insult because chairman doesn't refer to the gender. A chair is something with 4 legs. I've only got 2 legs. And I do take being called chair as an insult. So I think this should be discussed as part of equality and diversity. Thank you.
Councillor Walker?
I think it's a bit of silly comment, really, and it's not really helpful. It just feels a little bit like the exclusion of me before, that we just kind of, I don't know, it feels a bit like brushing under the carpet when it's actually a really important issue that needs to be spoken about. And it shows kind of, I don't know, it's not a good light. I don't think people would appreciate this not being spoken.
Well, as has been, the comment has been made, and in the recommendation it's made that this is dealt with in other forums. And as Councillor Clark has just said, we deal with it in equality and diversity. So moving on to the next scrutiny matrix, an energy self-sufficient borough. This is obviously very topical at the moment. I noticed that it's a potential item for Councillor Wheeler. Unfortunately, everything deals with communities, Councillor Wheeler. Yes, I like the idea that we're saying council's roles as community leaders, that we need to look at that and look at the group's links to carbon reduction agenda. It is very high priority, and I think, yes, we should be looking at it. Does everybody agree? Councillor Wheeler?
Yeah, absolutely, Chairman. I think we just got to make sure that we're scrutinising. We've got something to scrutinise. It sounds daft, but obviously scrutiny, we're not there to form the policy. And I think we just got to make sure that when the item comes forwards, we are scrutinising what we do now and recommendations going forward. So things like, you know, the wording, how can Russia produce enough electric power to get near self-sufficiency? Well, we can put recommendations in, but really that should be a, you know, and we've got things in our policies already in terms of the carbon management policy and everything else. It should be, make sure we just tie that in. I just want to make sure we're not diverting away from what our purposes are scrutinised by effectively doing Cambert's job of doing the policy. We're there to scrutinise that. So absolutely happy to that we bring that to the committee. We just need to make sure that we are getting it, the context right, what we're actually scrutinising.
Very good. Right, so I think it was recommended that we review the current work programme and that we look at the items that have been brought forward and determine any further topics to be included in the work programme. I don't think there are any topics coming forward that are ready to be put through the matrix. I'm working on conservation areas. I really think we should be reviewing conservation areas, and I am getting together evidence to demonstrate that, but it isn't ready yet. So unless anybody else has any items that are pressing to come forward, we'll move on to the next agenda item. And that's item 7, finance and performance management. And here we revert to Sarah Whitaker, who I think is going to give us our report.
Good evening.
Good evening, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So the Q2 position report is attached, which goes up to the 30th of September. And as with the Q1 report, the COVID variances are identified separately. The Q2 data, it must be noted, was produced prior to the additional restrictions and second lockdown. So therefore further lost income and costs and grants potentially will be included in the Q3 and onwards reports. As at Q2, the budget gap has reduced from the 422,000 that was previously reported to this group down to 244,000. And the table at 4.1 shows that COVID lost income is at 1.152 million and additional expenditure at 1.466. There are additional savings and grant funding, leaving the net pressure. And at this point, I point out that the figure at that table is incorrect. It should read 741,000. And the in-year efficiency is also summarised of 497,000, leaving a net budget gap of £244,000. At Appendix B, you can see the variances that are detailed. Notably, the favourable rent, housing benefit subsidy, and savings from community activities that haven't taken place due to COVID. The adverse variances result from lost income and notably the support that we are giving to the leisure provider Parkwood. Business rates are expected to give us a surplus of 3 million, which is along with the surplus from the Nottinghamshire pool. This 3 million arises from additional rates, reliefs that were given. So we've been given additional grants, which results in a deficit in later years. So as you'll see further in the report, the recommendation is to keep this in reserves to replenish those deficits in later years. Appendix A summarises the revenue position. Overall, it's a 3.5 million variance and 4.9 million to be transferred to reserves. Again, as previously mentioned, to cover the deficit on business rates that will arise next year. Paragraph 4.5 details the further funding announced as part of the title restrictions. And paragraph 4.6 and Appendix F shows the special expenses position. Now, obviously, this is also impacted by COVID. Our community facilities have not been able to open in the usual way. And this results in a projected loss of 0.82 million. This has been agreed by Special Expenses and SIL Group to be funded by a loan from the council. Paragraph 4.7 and Appendix D show the capital underspend currently projected at 23.8 million, of which we recommend a carry forward of 18.465 million to later years, the majority of which relates to Bingham Hub and the crematorium, and these are detailed in Appendix E. Paragraph 4.9 explains a delay in the progress of disposals. At the moment, this isn't causing an issue because of the slippage in the capital programme, so we are not expecting to have to borrow to fund that delay. Paragraph 4.10 to 4.17 updates the group on the COVID issues that were reported at Q1. In summary, these are potential further losses from the leisure impact of having to close and restrict due to the second lockdown. The multi-asset values had improved, but again, due to COVID, have taken a slight reduction since the last report. And there is a deficit created as a result of reductions in collection rates. The County Council take the largest share of this. And there has been new legislation recently that has allowed spreading of that deficit over 3 years. So the impact, although we will still see it, it will be spread over a 3-year period. Paragraph 4.18 discusses the Development Corporation proposed funding. And paragraph 4.19 discusses the levels of fly tipping, and we've proposed the engagement of WISE on a 6-month trial basis, and we will report updates on their performance to this group. So in conclusion, the projected position at Q2 has improved since the Q1 position, but due to the tighter restrictions and second lockdown, it will likely worsen. So we have delays in capital receipts offset by slippage, again resulting in unlikely need to externally borrow this year. There's still lots of uncertainty surrounding business rates and the spending review and fair funding review and Brexit, which can potentially cause financial pressures. And the position for the council will need to be closely monitored during this time. And with that, I'll hand over to Charlotte for the performance section.
Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to draw Councillors' attention directly to page 51, just because this provides a summary where we are with performance at the moment. So as it stands, there are no exceptions identified in the kind of strategic scorecard that we normally speak about. I would not be being honest with you if I said that meant that everything was hunky, because of course it doesn't. If you remember from our previous meetings, what we have done is taken out the targets for any performance indicators that are affected by COVID, where we're seeing that impact coming through. Simply, we would be flashing up everything that was coming through at the moment because a lot of areas have been affected by COVID, and that the appendices will show that. We are hoping that when we get to the beginning of next year, next April, we will be in a much better position to reset those targets for the new year and monitor this performance more closely. But please rest assured that just because it's not showing on your report as it means that we are not keeping an eye on these things internally and doing whatever we can to make sure that performance is as good as it can be. At the bottom of page 51 there, you'll see that we flagged up 2 performance indicators that are performing below where we would expect to be, but not necessarily ones that we flagged up as being affected by COVID year. The percentage of householder planning applications processed within target times is lower than we would like. It's lower than previous performance. However, that is as a direct result of us actually hitting the targets for the major applications very successfully. So we're targeting what resources we have available at the moment where it really matters. And that sounds very harsh to Miss who's having a garage extension or a change of use, but it's about making sure that we're capitalising where we can on that strategic front, making sure that the corporate strategy is delivered despite the difficulties that we are having at the moment. The difficulties with the householder planning applications we are rectifying. We've had an internal review and we will be putting more resources into planning over the next few months so that we can pull that back through and so that we can keep up with the incoming work, which of course is getting bigger as the building market gets back on its feet again after COVID. Household waste collections missed. So these are people missing bins. I'm sure that you can imagine that in order to keep our bin collection service running over the last 8 or 9 months has not just required moving around in terms of their rounds, so doing rounds to fill in that they're not necessarily familiar with, but also of agency staff to fill in gaps where staff are either poorly or self-isolating in line with government guidelines. So that is a necessary part of what we're doing. We're doing is making sure that those are being flagged up, and we have done some additional training with new staff on what we call assisted bins. So these are people who, for whatever reason, are not able to put their bin out on their front curtilage, and our binmen actually go and get that from. So each cab now has further instructions on where those properties are, and staff are asked to make sure that they pay attention to that. So we're hoping to bring that back. The other item that I would like to bring councillors' attention to, we go forward for any questions, is some additional information which we have included. I'm going to skip straight to the point. I think it's Appendix H. I will get you a page number. So it is page, and unfortunately the Appendix H bit has been missed off. This is a document that we produced internally to help with external recovery, and it really is a good overview of the council's position and where we were at the end of October. So obviously time moves on. We've had tier 3, we've had lockdown, we've got tier 3 again, and such like. But this information is stuff collecting internally, and it gives councillors a really good picture of where we were then. And I know that it is being kept up to date, so I would hope that we would be able to bring this forward to you again in the future to keep you appraised of the situation. And other than the fact that I'm more than happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure Sarah will be, that's all I have for this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Since there's 2 Gampson councillors on the call, I'm going to take full advantage of that fact about the Gampson Community Hall toilet. So I appreciate why they've been pushed back to 2021-22. I just want to make the comment that actually while it's closed, it'll actually be better, or say closed, or less bookings, and even when it does reopen, I think they'll take advantage of getting those toilets done as soon as. The toilets there are atrocious, to put it slightly. If anyone went and actually seen the state of those toilets, I understand. But that community hall is actually one that only 2 last figures I saw that actually made a profit, so to speak, are the ones we have. We don't want to lose bookings from there with people being put off by the toilets, and you would be, believe me, if you saw them. So just to feed that back, that if it is 21-22, it needs to be really at the start of that financial year when booking, like I said, there's going to be less disruption, bookings in place, by not with the toilets being closed and temporary ones in place, and potentially extra costs involved with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really endorse what Councillor Wheeler has said. That is a performing asset, Gampson Community Hall, and I too am very keen to ensure that its utilisation remains at a maximum level. So fully endorse what Councillor Wheeler has just said, and the quicker we can actually achieve this, the better. Thank you.
Can I just query something? I might be wrong, but on page 71 of the performance management report, Why have we reduced support for registered housing providers in the capital scheme slippage?
I think the slippage in relation to those support for registered housing providers has been split over 2 years. So it's to do with the delay in delivering that programme. So in terms of, it's £1 million in 2021, that's just been spread over the 2 years. So the support still remains the same at £1 million.
Right, because when I looked at it, I thought, it doesn't read right, but that's an explanation then. Thank you very much. Has anybody else? Oh, Councillor Wheeler and Walker.
Yeah, I've got a few actually. Sarah, on page 47, there just says that there is, I can't remember the figure now, but there's some money removed from the capital programme, paragraph 4.8. Where did I see it? Yeah.
47.
No, E, asset investment strategy.
Yes.
I just wondered, so if it's removed from the capital programme, where does it go?
It just removes the provision in the capital programme, so it increases the potential for capital spend in other areas, or to reduce the pressure in the event of not being able to balance the capital expenditure to the capital funding.
Okay, thank you. There was another thing I saw on page 48. It was an error actually about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Page 48. Let me just find it. It says it happened in August, but it happened in it said something like June, but it happened in August.
It does say June, yeah.
So I just wondered if that's incorrect, is that data incorrect? So does that mean, because it says it's improved as a result of that, but is that true? Is that, or is it just something else that's improved in June, if that makes sense? Because then that kind of, I wasn't sure about all that data then.
I think the data in itself is correct. It's probably the reference to the month that the scheme helped those businesses, but I think the reference to the improvement in the business receipts is correct.
But for August.
But for August, yeah.
We didn't see that improvement in June. We saw that improvement in August. Is what
correct, yeah.
So should we be actually making an amendment there?
I will yes, I would say so, because I think the scheme did go live in August. It was the month of August, wasn't it, not June?
Definitely, because I took part in it, so I knew that for sure. The other thing was, I wonder if you can clarify, I just don't understand the relationship between us and the leisure centres and Parkport, basically. Because it says that we have a lack of capital receipts from the reduction of swimmers. So I couldn't really work out why that impacted us, them not having a reduction in swimmers. So I was just wondering if you could kind of clarify that relationship for me.
I don't know what you mean by capital receipts. Can you just point me to?
No, probably the wrong word, to be honest. It just said that, I don't know where I found that actually. It just said that it was unclear. I've made notes when I was reading it, but it kind of said something about the lack of casual swimmers impact on our receipts. So I just didn't really understand that relationship, but.
Yeah. I think that with the relationship with the leisure provider is that obviously we base our relationship on the income and expenditure of what they expect to receive. Those payments to us depend on a number of receipts that they would get from their fitness, from their swimming. And obviously with the decline in customers and the fact that they're not able to open for casual swim impacts on us. Impacts on the leisure provider to be able to generate their profit. So in support of that, we obviously then cannot expect the leisure provider to pay us, or so it's that support level that we need to give to them, because they're still having to pay out their expenses to maintain that leisure service.
So the agreement between us and the leisure providers isn't just like a rental kind of landlord relationship. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, it's a management agreement, so that we pay the leisure provider to provide those services for us.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they wish to say? Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a question for Sarah, and also, I suppose, sharing with you a concern that I had at the budget update meeting in September, and that's regarding the Stabilization Reserve. And I've noted on page 50, paragraph 4.20, there is reference to the fact that we are depleting and drawing down on the Stabilization Reserve, obviously to move towards a balanced budget this year. And then in the recommendations, particularly 4B, I think it is, if I remember, on page 53, the projected business rate surplus is clearly being put into the, as a result of section 31, into the Stabilization Reserve. But the question I have for Sarah is, Sarah, do we have an indication of the funding gap in future years? Because, you know, putting aside the 3.017 million at the moment is obviously a very positive thing to do, but I'm still uncertain as to, and I would like reassurances in terms of how we are plugging the gap in terms of that Stabilization Reserve moving back to normal levels. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to address the point about the business rates surplus and deficit over the 2 years, it is just a timing issue. So we create an artificial surplus in this year because we've been given the credit, so to speak, for additional reliefs that will impact on next year's business rates account. So we will go into deficit. So I think in terms of putting that to one side, we can basically discount from the Organisational Stabilisation Reserve. In terms of next year and the year after, obviously we are counting and being prudent in that we know that the legacy impact of COVID is going to impact on next year, potentially the year after. So we have factored that into the budget. We're still working on the budget at the moment. I think ultimately the OS reserve is currently just over 2 million. It is going to drop over the next couple of years, but the plan is to replenish that reserve over the next 5 years, over the medium-term financial strategy, back to the levels that we're seeing at the moment.
Just responding to that, Chairman. Sarah, thank you very much for that. I think really logging, if we can, either in future meetings, COG meetings, the corporate overview group, or possibly as part of the governance group, just to keep an eye on the OS reserve, because I would like to have an indication of the actual timeline and proposals to replenish and at what rate. So once that information is available, either coming back to this particular group or one of the other scrutiny groups, to just make sure that we are fully aware of those plans. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points, or questions rather. With regard to the Development Corporation, it was proposed that there'd be £500,000 spent over 3 years, which is conditional on being match funded. Match funded by whom? Is my question. And the other question I had was in relation to COVID recovery, well, recovery, fingers crossed, hopefully. The business rates, discounts and the grants, have we been assured that they are being fully refunded to us by the government, or are we going to be out of pocket on those?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. In answer to your first question, the Development Corporation match funding is expected from all of the parties involved in the Development Corporation to match fund on equal amounts. And with regard to your second question on business rates discounts, the central government are usually very prompt with their reimbursement of our reliefs. So, for example, we had our Section 31 grants reimbursed at the start of the year, and usually within a very short time frame of announcing those new grants, we do get receipt in the bank. So I can pretty much assure you that we wouldn't be out of pocket with those.
Chairman, can I just come back? The development. Thanks, Sarah, for that. The Development Corporation. Sorry, could you just clarify? You said match funded by the other partners. Do you mean that everybody, every member of the Development Corporation that provided they all chip in £500,000? Is that what you mean?
I'd have to double check with you the exact names of the parties that are involved, but it's my understanding that all of the parties involved in the development of that area would be involved in the match funding.
All right, okay, well, I'll get clarification on that.
Yeah, I can get back to you on that.
Okay, all right, thanks very much.
Is that all the questions we have then? So, subject to that clarification, are we happy with the recommendation? Yes, everybody's happy? Very well. So that brings us to the end of the meeting. So if I could thank everybody for attending, and can I thank the officers for very comprehensive reports and some very clear answers. Thank you very much. And can I say happy Christmas? You can put your glasses on now, Charlotte.
All 3 pairs all at once, come on.
I definitely wouldn't be able to see.
Right, well, let's say happy Christmas.